Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, grasshoppers. This is a long overdue, perhaps a year or two, stream study for Cecil Purdy. A study stream requested by Ron Hayes some time ago, and I had put the study streams on the hiatus because of a little bit of a backlog. We're also due for another memorable game or two of mine. And we are also interested in doing one more quick study stream for Tiger Lark Person and one other, which escapes me at the moment. Now, we are going with the golden board for the golden players, as I've mentioned in a recent TikTok, Instagram reel, or YouTube short. The study of great players actually helps you to play great chess. If you're studying openings, certainly you may or may not be playing your opening extremely well, but this doesn't really help you with the coordination of your pieces in the middle game, your calculation toward and assessments toward a better endgame. And in general, in this particular instance, I have to admit that, one second, as I correct one other thing, I just want to mention that in this particular instance, E4 and E5. Now, Cecil Purdy was a universal player. He played both E4 and D4, as we shall see. Now, the one thing that deterred me from getting perhaps the most out of these study streams is the length. Originally, I had planned on 5 games or 2.5 hours of games. And in this particular case, I've noticed that longer streams are not as easily viewed. After all, who has 90 minutes or longer to study? So we're going to do as much as we can of Cecil Purdy in a short space of time. Our timer, of course, is on, and we are going to be doing a certain amount of Q&A. And this is primarily for subscribers. You can use TTS on the YouTube channel. Please do. The YouTube channel is easily accessible in the live, as you can find it right there. I'm going to have to redo all of my memorable games as I don't like the audio or the previous microphone that I was using. So in this particular instance, knight c3 is not normally viewed as a very purposeful move, but it indicates white's intention after the move knight f6 of sneaking into a king's gambit. This is also called the Vienna Gambit. Knight c3 is thought of as the Vienna game. Had this been a king's gambit, let's just get that on the board for the most part, then black's probably, I should easily say, most successful response is d5. And after the move, e takes d5, e4, and white could be, at best, hoping for, some form of counterplay. But black, of course, can take back the pawn at d5 at his leisure, or he can sacrifice it. Recently, at an amazing school, middle school in Brooklyn, I actually played one of their top players, and when I answered with Purdy's response, basically I answered with d5, he captured the wrong way, and by capturing on d5 allowed me to play the move e4. And this is not recommended, as the standard response to the Faulkner counter gambit, which you just witnessed in the King's Gambit, d3 can easily be met rather handily with the move bishop to b4. Now, I'm not entirely sure why my keyboard isn't working as well. Up there it is. So taking back the move bishop to b4, which is the standard move in this position, white should, however, have captured on e5, and after knight takes e4, queen to f3, we get into a an opening that is recommended by Gotham Chess. It is quite dynamic. However, because this opening has easy equalization tendencies, I tend to not recommend it so much to players beyond intermediate level. However, the Vienna game proper also means that if black were to play a move like knight c6, then bishop c4, indicating a later f4, perhaps after d3, we might sneak into a king's gambit decline. And furthermore, there is also the possibility of playing g3. Now, f4 is not necessarily recommended against the move knight c6, because after e takes f4, this game gets extremely complicated. After knight f3, in a recent game between Magnus Carlsen and Wang Yuyi, Magnus Carlsen's opponent actually played, Magnus Carlsen actually played the move bishop to b4. And by playing the move bishop to b4, Magnus Carlsen, of course, being Magnus Carlsen, he went on to win the game. Knight to d5 is the standard response, and obviously the bishop should try to find its way either to a5, or white should continue developing with knight on g to e7. After all, this is the way of the opening to a certain extent. Now, let me just see something here for a moment. Include variation arrows, computer analysis, just making sure that everything is set so that we don't see everything that is going on in the game if I hover over it. Now, in this particular case, the player in the Australian Championship in 1930 took on f4. After knight f6, the player took on f4, and white now has an obvious chance to take advantage of this faux pas on black's part. Please check it out and take a moment. See if I have to expand this just a little bit. There we go. Candidates. You might be looking for candidates for white to take advantage of this yielding of the center. Now, there are three ways to deal with the center. You can either hold the center, you can give up the center, as in this particular case, or you can fight for the center. There are various openings that do all of these things, but are usually committed to one. So in this particular case, the move that should be played is e5. Now, there are very few masters that would take on f4, but after the move queen e7, queen e2, black's knight is relegated to return to its original square. And at this very moment, you might notice that white has a significant space advantage and will probably easily recover his pawn after the move bishop takes f4. It's hard to suggest a move for black in this position because knight to d5 is coming, perhaps queen to e6, and after the move d4, d5, white has several ways of embarrassing black, notwithstanding the fact that we can just recapture our pawn at f4 straight away. One more time from the beginning, the Vienna game, beginning with knight c3, prevents the counterattacking move d5, so therefore black fights for the center. In general, I have a recommendation against the four-move checkmate attempts, or any move that does not attack the e5 pawn. If any move does not attack the e5 pawn, then black should in turn counterattack the e4 pawn. This allows us also the central pawn break with d5, which led white astray in this particular game because they, not knowing what was going on, had only one line against the king's gambit, I imagine, and that was the acceptance of the king's gambit. Now, Cecil Purdy actually plays the move knight f3, which is somewhat dubious given the fact that black can indeed play d5 in this position and return to not only the main line, but the slight advantage that black has in getting a counterattack on the center. So ultimately, black plays bishop to e7, and Purdy is allowed to take over the center. And after d6, white has complete and full control over the center. Now, in this particular position, we once again have a choice of moves. And good morning, Donnie. How are you, buddy? Good to see you, man. So here we have, in this particular position, a difficult decision on how to continue placing our pieces. Are we going to castle queenside, or are we going to castle kingside? And if so, all three moves in this particular instance need to be committed to and followed up on. So, for example, queen to d2, very logical. Or we have to place the white squared bishop and castle kingside. Now, I didn't start my timer, of course, but this is where you take a moment and you think about your future objectives. And choose. Since we hadn't been running the timer, interestingly enough, the best move in the position is bishop d3 with an attack on h7, black's weakest square at this moment. However, Cecil Purdy chose to move bishop to c4, and while this move restricts black's ability to play d5, black has already committed their pawn to d5. I mean to d6. So they're not necessarily going to be moving the same thing twice in the opening. The other major factor in this position, the other major problem with bishop to c4, is a standard tactic by black involving the removal of the defender in the center and this quick and easy equalization to nullify white's space advantage. After all, white is going to lose their center pawn. They're going to lose a certain amount of time with the bishop. Black may be able to even contest white's best placed piece, the bishop on f4, and take advantage of the king being in the center on this open file with a rook to e8. So Cecil Purdy is playing an opponent in this Australian Championship of 1930-1931 who is perhaps not necessarily the most, what's the right word? The most perceptive. So we are very lucky in this sense that his opponent is being very accommodating, as his opponent simply plays the move bishop to g4. And this lends itself to another conundrum on white's part. Basically, the fact that white is going to have to choose what's going to happen after the move h3. Either they put that bishop out there to capture, or they put that bishop out there to retreat and perhaps weaken. Namaste, Donnie. By the way, that is International Master-elect on his way to Grandmaster, Donnie Ariel. What is your YouTube channel, Donnie? I'm drawing a blank right now at the moment. Feel free to give a plug for your YouTube channel, as he, as a working family man, is plotting his way to becoming a grandmaster ahead of, and certainly with far greater chances than Gotham Chess or aka Levy Rosman. It's great to have you here, buddy. On a Sunday afternoon, we should be doing something else, but I'm trying to squeeze this in before a lesson, and we have very little time, as it turns out. I was off on my timing. Let me just make sure that we don't have but we do. Limited time. So our opponent is being very, very accommodating. And it's always nice to have accommodating opponents. They don't develop their pieces. They are at least fighting for the center. They have missed the opportunity for the fork trick in the center. As Purdy realizes that that fork trick is in the air, he backs up his bishop. Black continues his development. White centralizes and prepares to bring in a rook and tucks his king away from any danger on this long diagonal. Although I don't necessarily see it. Personally, Black is obviously focused only on playing the move d5 and securing an outpost perhaps for his knight on the d5 square. But White doesn't necessarily have to accommodate that. White is going to grab space, and in fact should grab more space. But as I mentioned, we are bringing our last rook into the game, and we can clearly see who's the superior player. Black willingly moves the same piece twice, allowing the rook to reach the third rank. But Purdy chooses to use the G file. Now, interestingly enough, Black could easily start trying to chip away at the center now with moves like c5 or d5, or perhaps even try to go after the bishop on a4. I'm sorry, on b3 with a5, a4. But instead, it chooses a very strange move. Remember, we have a very accommodating opponent. Now, I can't say that Cecil Purdy lived in a time of great chess knowledge, but we are talking about Australia. And Purdy, of course, follows up on his idea to attack on the open file, and we get to see Black's intention of trying to stop up the G file with the help of his knight. Purdy simply follows up with an opportunity to double rooks, and perhaps Purdy is seizing upon the chance to put more pressure upon the knight on g5 with the move queen to d2. Once again, Black should probably try to cause trouble with counterplay either on the queen side or in the center, but instead, maybe even just getting his king off the file might help. But instead chooses to bring his rook to the center. Now, we should already spot that the f7 square is a grave weakness in many positions, and already it only has one defender, so not that that will come into play in this particular game as White begins to load the cannon on the G file. Now, it's in this moment when Black displays a little bit less defensive knowledge than he should. Obviously, the move g6 does not look so tempting, but now that he's nullified the bishop on b3 from pinning the pawn on f7, g6 is perhaps the move that he should be playing for. Instead, he neglects just a little bit the defense of his knight on g5 by playing the move bishop to f5, bishop to f8, and after bishop takes g5, h takes g5, rook takes g5 really is going to put a maximum amount of pressure on the file. However, Purdy chooses the intermezzo on the d file by playing e takes d5. I don't necessarily know that this was really needed, and Black once again accommodates him with the move knight takes d5. Now, we could continue to follow up. By the way, should we play the move rook takes g5, we are threatening rook takes g7 and queen takes g7 mate. I can't explain Purdy's choice here as he exchanges one more set of minor pieces before pursuing this plan. However, perhaps he had his reasons, and in this particular case, we can already see that the pawn on d5 is weak. The king attempts to run to the side of the board. Once again, I mentioned earlier that maybe h8 was a better square for him. However, because he goes to h7, we're going to take a moment for our candidate moves for White. It's where we seek out a little bit of audience participation. This will be available on YouTube, so you can pause at any point to quiz yourself on what's going on. However, in this first game of Cecil J. Purdy, the first international, he's actually got an over-the-board international master title, but the first international correspondence chess champion, we get to see what we might do to follow through. Good morning, Ron. Happy birthday, Ron. I see that Ron has poked his head in. Now, of course, this is just the first of several. Many years ago, I would do these study streams, and I would try to do 4 or 5 games in less than 2 to 2.5 hours. However, those were very cumbersome to plan. Once the IRL world, for the most part, came in, we no longer had the opportunity to really do such dedicated streaming. So we put them on a hiatus somewhere a few years, if not a couple of years back. And if you haven't already noticed that White has the ability to blast his way through once again, there's only one defender of the d5 square, while there are many attackers attacking the g6 square, I mean. As I am slightly rushed, but don't worry, I will be continuing these after 5 p.m. today, perhaps, when I may or may not have a break from lessons. We will see. But given that weakness is very ill defended, the opponent has no choice but to play f6 after the move. F takes g6, then it's simply checkmate. So therefore he has to do anything in his power to keep White from winning quickly. And there are several ways to win the game in this particular instance. The choice of Cecil Purdy, of course, is a good one. Oops, did I not spell? There we go. Candidates for White. Can we find the way that Purdy chooses, the fastest way, or an alternative way? There are several ways to checkmate in this position, all of which are just as amusing. So you might find a mate in 5, a mate in 4, a mate in 3. All in all, finding any one of these choices.
Said RH6QG3.
Queen G6. I know what you meant, Ron. The birthday man himself moving to Stockholm. I'm so jealous. And by the way, we do have, as a background, the Golden Hall of Stockholm. Can't remember the name of the building, but it is a very, very cool backdrop. I had to look a little further for a Stockholm backdrop just for Ron. And Ron is correct. Ron is correct. Cecil Purdy actually does choose the move. Not necessarily the fastest, it's checkmate in 5 with the move rook to h6. However, checkmate in 3 could have been found after rook to g8. There's like literally no way to stop the checkmate in this particular instance, as the queen can try to throw itself in the way many, many ways for the most part. But basically on queen f5, we have rook h8 check with a decoy or a deflection or an attraction to the square h8. Or after the move, let's say after rook to g8, there are many ways to try to slow things down. Queen to g4, queen takes g4, followed by queen h3 mate, or queen g6 mate. It's very tricky. Queen f7, bishop f7, rook e1, queen g6 mate, once again, is also in the cards. So there's just no way to stop checkmate in 3. However, Cecil Purdy chose the very extravagant rook to h6. And queen to f6 check when the opponent chose at long last to resign. In any event, this was Cecil Purdy versus, see if I have his first name, Cowen, at the Australian Championship of 1930-31, perhaps one of his shortest victories among many of his games that we're about to show. I just want to thank everyone for being here. We will continue this streaming of Cecil Purdy's memorable games. Thank you all for being here. Cheers and ciao. Thank you, Ron, for stopping by. I will be doing more later in the day. I actually had some serious issues with Streamlabs not starting for the last couple of hours, and I ended up uncovering other further technical issues. So thank you all for being here. Cheers and ciao. We will be rating an IRL game in progress, Vienna and Kaya. So you may watch some IRL chess. For those of you who are here, and thank you for your subscription, Donnie. It is great to see you. Ron, hey, ladies and gentlemen, who was gifted more subs in the last 2 days than absolutely necessary. Almost anyone he wants me to study, any world champion that he wants me to study, I'm going to limit it to world champions. As with Tiger Larp Person, Swedish champion Tiger Larp Person, I found the best or memorable games difficult to choose. Primarily because he is not a world champion, so he tends to play a little bit more difficult to understand concepts and ideas than the world champions might be able to show us. Thanks, everyone. Have a terrific day. Dark Blade, moderator extraordinaire.